All right. We are going live now on YouTube. Good evening, everyone. This is Devasis Kumar Panda, co-founder team Lex Cognoscenti. I welcome you all on behalf of my team to this edition of Lex Cognoscenti's Rendezvous series. Before I introduce the eminent guest of this evening, I must tell you the purpose behind organizing this series. The basic vision behind this interview series is to facilitate and provide the legal fraternity with some invaluable anecdotes and escapades of several legal luminaries and doins. And keeping that purpose in mind, today we are fortunately joined by Mr. R. Venkataramani, who is an eminent jurist, senior advocate, and former member of the Law Commission of India. He has a total professional standing of almost 44 years at the bar. He was designated as a senior advocate by the Supreme Court of India on 17 January 1997. He was an advocate on record in the Supreme Court of India for 15 years prior to his designation as a senior advocate. He was appointed as a member of Law Commission for two times, one in 2010 and again for a further term in the year 2013. He was a member of the subcommittee on directive principles of state policy and was involved in the Constitution Review Commission work under the chairmanship of Justice M.N. Venkatachalya. He has also contributed to the report on setting up the Equal Opportunities Commission. He has sportively participated in various activities of several lawyers associations as life member. He has worked on revision of the constitutional law volumes of the Halsbury's Laws of Indian series. He takes a keen interest in academic activities and is associated with a number of law schools, and he visit, visits number of law schools and give excellent lectures there. He has numerous publications to his credit as well. So with that, I, Devasis Kumar Panda, on behalf of Team Lex Cognoscenti and Jyoti Prakash Datta, who is our co-founder, welcome you to this talk show. And we are really grateful that you consented for today's interview session, and we are really looking forward to this.
Thank you so much. Please go ahead.
Yes, sir. Sir, the first page of our interview session will be taken up by me, and at the second phase of the session, Jyoti Prakash will join in and he will ask you certain questions relating to your career and life, sir.
No cross-examination.
Indeed not, sir.
All right, go ahead.
All right, sir.
Yes.
So, sir, starting with the first question, that is very basic question. We would like to know about your childhood, about your family background and schooling, sir.
Firstly, do you think that's very relevant, except from the point of view of assessing how one has progressed in the profession, whether because of the family background or notwithstanding the family background, right? Except for that, perhaps that background may or may not be relevant. Sometimes the family backgrounds of many leading persons in any walk of life assumes an importance, sometimes very juicy background, sometimes very what called the long lineage belonging to rich families, or aristocratic families, so on and so forth. Then people open up with interest and find, oh, he belongs to this family. Okay. But all that stories are becoming a little irrelevant in contemporary times, because all of us, I think, are equally entitled to move forward in life and make the best of the opportunities which life will present to us. And as long as we are not found wanting in the best qualities of a human being, perhaps a family background may or may not be relevant. Except, as I said, it becomes an indelible part of one's life, right? So if you are brought up in a particular environment, traditional, conservative, progressive, everything seems to be adding up to how you have grown in the profession. But sometimes it may not be. You belong to a family where nobody has been in the medical profession or nobody has in the legal profession, but you are an outstanding professional, right? It depends on the individual. But therefore, I wouldn't say, as far as my family background is concerned, it is no direct bearing on my professional entering into the profession or progressing in the profession, except that both on my maternal and paternal side, the families belong to a rich, traditional, value-oriented families. And without going into the long lineage of both the maternal and the paternal side, I can only say that on my maternal side, one of my grandfather's brother was a minister in one of the princely estates in Tamil Nadu, and so there was something a legal background about the king's local assembly and how justice was being dispensed there. But I don't know whether I borrowed anything from that or not, because I never seen my grandfather's brother. He passed away before I was born. So probably there is something in the DNA which has come to me very remotely. I can't say that. But as I said, a family of values, where work, respect and regard for people, and also respect and regard for the dignity of every human being. So I can say my father was not in the legal profession, but was a textile engineer. So we settled in Pondicherry way back in the year 1940. So my father, I remember my youthful days, the school days, when the workers in the spinning mill where my father was working at the head of the mill, the workers were entertained at home, regardless of any caste, etc. And then there were social functions like Diwali or any one of the social big religious functions, where workers would come home in big number and be part of a very good gathering. So I remember all those years. So father had never maintained any social distances, and so there was a set of values which I think I'd imbibed simply by watching how I grew. So, well, that's so much as about my family background. And how I came to the legal profession is another story. Yes, please go ahead.
That was quite fascinating to know, sir, and your answer was quite uh, enlightening. That family background and family are indelible part of our life, and we inherit all those characteristics of families, whichever they practice and whichever they try to inherit on us. And as you ended this answer with how you came to this legal profession, we would like to continue from there only. That who was your inspiration to take up law, and how you ended up joining law school, and how was your life there?
It's very difficult to give only one reason. There are several reasons. But if I look at the most influential of those reasons, so I was a student of physics in Loyola College in Madras. So I did not visualize that when I completed my graduation that I'll be getting into the legal profession or studying law. I still wanted to pursue my higher education in the field of science. I still keep reading books in modern physics and its connection to philosophy and religion and law and whatever you may call. So, but while I was a student of physics in Madras Loyola College, which is one of the premier institutions in Madras and even today, and which opened up entirely new vista of knowledge and frontiers of knowledge. So I came across larger number of students in different colleges in Madras, with whom I gained deep friendship and association. And we started running a fortnightly in Tamil, and particularly, mostly for the student community. So while doing that, I was certainly exposed to issues of social reordering, social justice, injustice in our communities, and all those kind of issues. So that's one influence. And while I was still a student, a graduating student, but the association which I gained during this period continued after my graduation, and we thought we should continue our associations and and try to be part of an ongoing youth generation of youth, which should contribute to a new India and development of a new India, and then a new India where one always thinks about what Rabindranath Tagore said in his famous verse 32 in Gitanjali, to cross all those frontiers and open up your life in a world where freedom will be available for everyone. Gitanjali is a beautiful verse of Tagore. So these things continued for quite some time, and I branched off into so many other part-time activities, work. I did not get my coveted postgraduate admission in MSc or MA in Madras University. Very difficult those days unless you are at the top of the rank even in graduation. So I got into all kinds of jobs. I have done part-time teaching in some IAS coaching class. I've done some part-time teaching in some other classes, colleges, tutorial colleges. So I also learned automobile engineering under my brother, who is an automobile engineer. He wanted me to become part of a huge automobile establishment. We thought we'll do that. So all that happened about 2 to 3 years. So it was ultimately my mother's insistence that I must study law, because she remembered her family where her grand uncle was in the King's Assembly and things like that. So at her insistence, I think I thought, oh, let me look at this option. And by the time one of my close associations, which again during my Loyola College, has started, he got admission in Madras Law College and he was studying. But Madras Law College declined my admissions. I could not get admission in Madras Law College. So that's the reason, as destiny would have it, I think. For good reasons, I did not get admission in Madras Law College. So the result was I got admission in the Pondicherry Law College, where we belong to. And that's where the next chapter of both my life as a student of law and all that built up. So when I say next chapter, so when I joined the Government Law College, Pondicherry, Professor Madhava Menon, the figure whom nobody can, write off when you talk of legal education. So he came there as a principal of the Government Law College on leave from Delhi University. So that from then on, life became different. Both my student days and thereafter my coming to Supreme Court, entirely on the arrangement made by Professor Menon. I never thought I'll move out of Pondicherry practice, or while I completed a year and a half in Pondicherry in the office of the public prosecutor, a well-known lawyer in Pondicherry at that time, I never thought I'll move out of Pondicherry or probably move out of Madras. That was the only ultimate destination one had in mind. But destiny has other demands on my life, and Professor Menon said, you are coming to practice, have your practice in Supreme Court, and he made all the arrangements and took personal interest in my shifting to Supreme Court, and that's how I landed here. So on my own, probably I would not have been in Delhi. My teacher took personal interest in me. And why he took a personal interest, I can only say probably I was one of his best students, that's all. He was a coward, that's about all. There are a lot of very interesting anecdotes of mine with Professor Menon, and of course, while as a student, how we got very close to each other and why he took a liking to me. So much so that after I shifted my practice to Supreme Court and joined the chambers of Mr. P.P. Rao under Professor Menon's arrangement, our lifelong journey between me and Professor Menon continued much more. And it's a very interesting journey.
Undoubtedly, sir. And as you said, Madhav Menon sir has uh, changed lives of many students, and including you as well. Now, sir, as you said that you joined Supreme Court after a short stint of practice in Pondicherry, I would like to know that how were your initial days in the Supreme Court bar, and how was your senior, as you mentioned, PP Rao, sir, and how all those things were there back then. So, if you can share something on that.
Looking back, I think I had no time for any extracurricular engagements. Probably I never thought of having a time for, well, visiting a friend or sparing time for a visit to a cinema theater or to anything which I may call extracurricular. Probably all my time was devoted to working in Mr. Rao's chamber. One, the devotion part of it and the commitment. And I cannot say whether I had any dreams after joining this chamber of moving in any particular direction. I don't think I dreamt of anything. It's like working day after day, day after day, simply going with the tide of, flowing with the tide of events, right? So the tide of events carried me along. So the more I worked with commitment, I think the more I began to get appreciations, both from Mr. Rao and from his other instructing counsel who came to brief him. So that's the best recollection I would like to keep as part of the diary of my days with Mr. Rao in his chamber. Mr. Rao is one of the, I should say, a very exacting senior who would like to see people growing and really getting groomed under him. And it's not a light job to have worked under him, right? And I really think grew under his tutelage. So whatever I have learned in about 5 years under his watchful eyes, and then after becoming an advocate in the court, everything began to pay rich dividends because I learned some very important fundamentals about the legal profession. One, as I said, commitment to the profession and commitment with all principles, namely integrity and not with the mind to reach somewhere, what one may call reaching somewhere financially or in terms of positions, officers, or any appointment. You don't think about any of them. You just have to keep working. That's what I did. So maybe even after I was designated, that's another story. So I don't think I was running after anything. I never ran after anything. I never pursued any particular office, except much later. When you reach a stage in your profession, there'll always be sometimes an offer, sometimes a desire, sometimes this or that. You know that. But I think I must say, by and large, my profession moved along with the tides and demands of the times. That's all it happened. But I must say that Mr. Rao, like Professor Menon, is an integral part of my life. And I owe it to him that he continued to give me a lot of credit and recognition even after long years after I left his chamber. And because he used to consult me on some issues, talk to me about some propositions of law, and ask me to give some assistance or help, which he could have got from somebody else, but he always thought very fondly. And that's because the kind of reliance one can place upon somebody must be built over a period of time. And reliance is not merely a question of being available, but being available qualitatively. Like you must be available qualitatively, and what you do and help must be really relevant, fulfilling, and satisfying, so that the other person looks for more and more from you, right? That's how Mr. Rao he had worked, and so I miss him now. You want to ask me anything about the early days of my profession? After I became an advocate in record, I branched off virtually into several directions and of law. I have done a lot of criminal law work for cases coming from Madras at this point of time. And then, of course, labor and services, and later tax law and indirect taxes. So I think slowly different points and demands to work in different fields of law came on their own, and I think I readily was able to uh, get and quickly, easily acclimate myself with those fields. And I think today, if you ask me, perhaps there's not one field where I have not handled any case, number of handled cases. And very interestingly, even though I was enrolled as a member in the Tamil Nadu Bar Council, my clientele between the 80s to 90s were all mostly from northern parts of the country. They were from Punjab, Haryana, or Maharashtra, or Andhra, or Madhya Pradesh, take any of those. Only after I got designated, then governments began to engage you slowly, many governments. So that's again another enriching experience. So the resignation story is also an interesting story, and I never thought I'll be designated as a senior advocate. I never worked for it. I never worked. I never planned, and so it so happened that one of the judges of the Supreme Court asked me one day, after some very interesting events in my career, about which I need not talk about it now, right? Um, so he asked me one day, why have you not thought about designation so far? And when I told him it had not entered into my mind, he said, you applied. We would like to consider your case. So, well, that's how it happened. It just happened like that. So it's been a very rewarding professional life for me, notwithstanding the tough challenges in. So there have been occasions because you are a first generation lawyer, you don't have all those supporting infrastructure, namely property, a house, supporting income or resources. You don't have all that. So there could be always challenges for every first generation lawyer. While they are very common challenges, for individuals they may be different, distinct. So I faced all those challenges, but I think I never regretted them. I don't think I never said, oh, I'm suffering these challenges. I never felt like that. We just received them, went ahead, never thought that you were facing a challenge. You met it, right? It's like being called to wrestle, right? Suddenly, when you don't know you're going to wrestle at all. It's like that. So it's like, moved on. So I am very happy about what happened to me in my professional career. A lot of people have helped me, and every one of them helped me in different ways. People who came suddenly and did something, and people walked out, came in. So I always remember my first senior in Pondicherry who says, when you enter the profession, and when you even reach the top of the profession, keep your doors open 24 hours a day, because you don't know when your services will be demanded. And don't keep a price on your service for everything you do. Service is your motto. How you get rewarded for the service is not in your hands. Maybe after some time you may fix a price, but don't go by that. That's a thing which will keep, changing from time to time. So he was. So those words always remain with me, and I keep telling the same thing, sharing the same thing with every intern, every person who come and work in my chamber, or every law student whom I address in any law schools, right? So don't start today. The pursuit of law has become very different compared to the generation when we entered the study of law. And it has, but the way it has become different, it has also invited a lot of challenges. More challenges than what we faced probably were to face those days. One is the intense competition, then the number. But then, along with that, you have a lot of opportunities. So when there's something which is balancing which is happening. Okay. So what I would say is that, as I keep telling every law student, don't look at the what to put it very crudely. Don't look at what fixed deposits you will have after some period of time. The only biggest fixed deposit you should have is your reputation. How you build your reputation, how you build your image, and what you do with the best of knowledge you acquire, and in what manner you assist the entire administration of justice. And the administration of justice is not merely the court. Every one of us who play a role in and outside the courts are part of this very, very complex process of administration of justice. Play your role effectively and do it with commitment, and then everything else will follow. But of course, destiny may carry us to different areas, different places, different positions, officers, and many of us may not become, let's say, if you aspire to become a judge, perhaps your aspirations may or may not come true. You want to become a solicitor general, attorney general, an advocate general, it may not come true. You want to become a minister, perhaps it may not come true. But the endeavors you make towards all those aspirations and goals should be a full-fledged endeavor in the sense full of honesty, integrity, and commitment. Nothing beyond that. Everything else is secondary.
Indeed, sir. Uh, while deliberating upon this, you have given a number of, I would say, north stars and advices for younger generation like me and who all are viewing this particular interview session. We shouldn't run after something that will come to us automatically if we uh, give our full time, give our full strength, give our full hard work and commitment and integrity. That will come automatically. And then again, you said that we shouldn't cry over a challenge. We should overcome that by finding solutions and pass on, jump that particular situation to overcome that in a well manner. Now, sir, as you said that you were quite connected with Professor Madhav Menon, and you said that you have few anecdotes and few memories, good memories with him. So I would like to know that what all memories you have with him and any teachings of him that impacted on you and you would like to pass on to us uh, related to Professor Madhav Menon, if you can say.
Well, the study of anything by humans involves going to the root, to the matter, the roots of any pursuit of the subject, and how do you really perceive it, right? So, the first example I can give you, Professor Menon taught us criminal law and sometimes jurisprudence, and till lecturers, more lecturers came also constitutional law. And you remember that old English case of a shipwrecked crew and cannibalism, whether it is manslaughter or not, right? That case was discussed by Professor Menon for almost more than 15 days. One single case. And what is the reason? how do we really understand the subtle distinctions in the Indian Penal Code or any penal code between different ideas of different crimes, manslaughter, murder, right? So why is this distinction drawn, and what is the historical background behind it, and how do you really come to grips with these distinctions? Now, again, while doing this exercise of was that Dudley, that case is Dudley versus Stephens. Dudley versus Stephens, right? Now, if you look at the definition of proved in the Evidence Act, it's a very complex set of a definition. It has lot of what called layers of ideas and concepts. The definition of proved in the Indian Evidence Act. I think linking this case, Dudley versus Stephens, and the concept of proved, because for any court, ultimately, the evidence before it is the material on the basis of which a court comes to a conclusion. And how do a judge come to a conclusion? The way a judge comes to a conclusion depends on the guidance available under the Evidence Act. But how many of us, how many judges or lawyers really closely pay your attention to the definition of proved in the Evidence Act? Professor Manon almost took us a month's time on unraveling the dimensions of what is proof and how we contribute to the understanding of proof both as a professional and as a judge. That made me think that nothing superficial will work in the profession. No ad hoc conclusions, no ad hoc, determinations. You will have to plunge deep into it. So the plunging part of it is an exercise which must come over a period of time. So an issue comes to you, a brief comes to you, then you want to get an immediate relief to your client who is in distress. It could be a case of a bail, an anticipatory bail, a quick matter, or an injunction, right? Or some other remedy where somebody is in need of a quick relief. So naturally, we will be tempted to go for a quick process where everything can happen. But well, that is legitimate. What I would say is, even in those circumstances, should not ordinarily guide you in all instances where your mind must be duly tuned and trained to plunge to the depth of every issue before you. When you so plunge, you will find perhaps some solution which is disagreeable to your client, or a solution which neither of you ever thought about, something which nobody ever thought about. So the plunging deep into it is something which I learned from him, and which I continue to learn more from Mr. P.P. Rao as well. So when I started reading literature other than law in Loyola College, I had one of my friends was a student of literature. He was one Mahapatra from Orissa, right? And later he did his MA literature and became a teacher somewhere, I don't recollect now. But we used to just read, he initiated my interest in reading English literature and some elements of philosophy. Like the well-known Indian philosopher in contemporary time called J. Krishnamurti. So when I started reading that, when it came to law, right? By the time I came to law in Pondicherry Law College, I've been exposed sufficiently to political science, to political ideas, social sciences, and all that which should become part of your understanding of law. So when I said plunge, every case has dimensions beyond the letter of the law or dimensions beyond the mere issue presented to you. Okay? So that part is very important. That's one thing which I learned. At the same time, there are some lighter, anecdotes. I was asked, as part of our project reports, we had to give some report to Professor Manan in the second year in our criminology course, something on criminology. I don't remember now. So each one of us gave a project report. So Professor Manan was assessing each one of the reports. So when after reading my project report, he said, "Don't write such too high stuff in your examination. You may read whatever you want, but in examination, don't write such high stuff. Your examiner may either not like to be told that you are better read than him, right? So anyway, whatever you learn, write it in a way that the examiner should be able to receive it." I was wondering why he said that. I got an answer soon. We had another friend of mine who got a gold medal in jurisprudence paper, but I got about 8 to 10 marks lesser than him. I was wondering, where did I go wrong? The Professor Manan said, "I told you, you may read whatever you may read, but you must write what an examiner would like you, would think that you should know or need not know." Things like that. Very interesting. So anyway, so after coming back to Delhi University and I moving to the Supreme Court, when he assumed position as the Vice Chancellor of the National Law School, Bangalore, I used to visit Bangalore Law School almost every second or third month whenever he called me. So it's been very frequent visits, almost for 4 years. I was not even a senior advocate at that time. I had to spare. Traveling was not as easy as it today. We were probably only Indian Airlines flying those time, and I could not probably afford to fly very often, But I did, and I used to go, and only because Professor Manan said you must come. So there were a larger number of occasions in National Law School, Bangalore, including seminar classes, teaching assignments, or any symposia, anything. So I think I've gathered a lot of insights from attending those events. So when he went to Calcutta and became the Vice Chancellor of NUJS, on the inaugural day I was there in Calcutta when the university got opened, and one day he called me and said, "Look here, environmental law, and very soon, perhaps in another 10 years or so, a lot of commercial law areas will open up for the profession, and courts are going to be, confronted with resolving this commercial and environmental law issues." That is prophetic. What he said that day is prophetic. Today is happening. So I had participated in a large number of environmental law empowerment committee meetings in NUJS and also again back in Bangalore. So that association continued. There are lots of events which I can share with you while in Delhi, but many are very deeply personal, right? So when he assumed charge as director of the National Judicial Academy in Bhopal, so I was obviously one among those persons who thought should come and assist him as a resource person in the Judicial Academy, which I've been doing ever since then. So I think it is almost 1994, 95 onwards, I've been going to Judicial Academy as a resource person. That's another very rewarding and enriching part of my professional career. You learn by teaching. Every teacher learns by teaching, and I also learned by teaching and by talking. So if I can tell myself that why don't you write a book on jurisprudence, I think I'll be happy to do that. If today I say that why don't you write generally on law, both in its implications for domestic and international relevance and what it means to be a student of law, I think I would like to write about that. So all these are gathered from my deep insights into how law as a social instrument is designed, created, changed, altered, shaped, chiseled, sometimes, taken to heights, sometimes kept in, fetters, whatever one may call it, right? So it all happens. Yes, I'm indeed delighted to have had all this.
All right, sir. That was quite interesting to know about your memories with Madhav Menon, sir, and all the learnings that you have learned from him. Now, sir, another aspect which I came while reading about you is that you have worked under the chairmanship of Justice M.N. Venkataramani in the Constitution Review Commission. So, you would like to know how was your experience in that commission, and how was your experience with working with Justice Venkataramani? If you can tell us something.
Justice Venkatachalya probably talked about my inclusion in this commission for two reasons. One, when he was a judge in the Supreme Court, he already wrote a preface to my book on the judgments of Justice Chinnappa. A very brief but a beautiful preface. So after he wrote the preface and the book was published, shared long years of intellectual companionship. Professor Manon was also in one of the committees in the, Constitutional Review Commission. So Professor Manon was another reason why Venkatachalya thought I should be there. So it's essentially, I think, Venkatachalya's impression that my intellectual inclinations and probably the orientation to be able to contribute on a very difficult or a more called involved part of the Constitution, namely the directive principles. So every part of a Constitution has their own, attraction and relevance. But when you talk of directive principles, it runs through the entire Constitution. It is related to governance. It is related to social justice. It is related to equality and dignity. It just runs into almost all the radiates in several directions. So we had worked long hours almost every day. After my court work, I used to go to Venkatachalya's chamber in Vigyan Bhavan, have long discussions with him, pick up. Remember in the year 2000, 2001, you had no search engines like what you have today. Like, so you have to do it mostly manually and all that, or sitting in libraries or by browsing through some contact or the other. So that's how we used to work. So I used to go and sit with him. We'll have some ideas picked up, scratch your head, and then write them out, write and rewrite and go back again. So as I told you, I think that experience was also equally important for me later when I became a member of the Law Commission. Because how do ideas in law really emerge, and how do they germinate, and how do they grow, and what kind of a framework is required for a proper germination of a good, sound legal idea or a principle. So all that I think I learned quite a bit under him in my interactions in the Constitutional Review Commission work, which paid, said much later in the Law Commission, has come very usefully. And even today I keep in touch with him, and we exchange letter or pleasantries, and I rank him as one of the called excellent, judicially minded, and a judge who could perceive the impact of what one is doing as a judge, and therefore he had that very intuitive capacity, balanced with his insights gained from his very extensive reading and knowledge. The most erudite judge, and apart from my comparisons of Venkataramani with judges like Justice V.R. Krishnaiyer or Justice Bhagavati, with both of whom I moved very, very closely. But I think each one of them were eminent in their own ways, and given their background and from which they came and how they contributed to the Supreme Court at different points, and, it's a very loving story.
All right, sir. That was quite great to know about your stint in under the chairmanship of Venkat Chalaya, sir. Now, sir, as I have completed the questions that I had with me, I would like to call Jyoti Prakash to the studio. Uh, s- yes.
How
So,
long I can spare for you?
all right, Jyoti Prakash, you may continue with the questions you have.
His link is not.
It is unstable, I guess. Anyway, sir, let him join. Till then, I would like to ask you another question that you would have asked, obviously. As you have spent almost 44 years in the Supreme Court, there must be a number of anecdotes with other great lawyers when you joined the bar initially. So, if you can tell any anecdotes with any legendary lawyer or any courtroom conversation which was quite fascinating to know. So, if you can share on that part.
You ask what anecdotes before I became a senior advocate, I had briefed almost every one of those well-known senior counsel in Supreme Court at that point of time. From A.K. Sen, who was the law minister, and it used to be brief, very brief, briefing sessions with him. But he was a very delightful senior advocate, getting things on his hands so quickly. So I had briefed the late Sri Soli Soraabji in larger number of matters, sometimes tax, sometimes civil, sometimes other categories of cases, and so much so that I, I, I don't know whether any particular case where I briefed Soraabji would be of any importance, but there are a larger number of them. Then I briefed Dr. Y.S. Chitle, a former late, late Dr. Y.S. Chitle, who is closely family connected to Justice Chandrachud. Then two other legendary figures, Mr. Ramamurthy and Mr. R.K. Garg, who formed the liberal progressive, so-called the left part of the Supreme Court bar. So I've also briefed several former attorney generals, including Lal Narayan Sinha from Bihar, Mr. G. Ramasamy from Tamil Nadu. We worked very closely with many of them. And of course, lots of other later day senior counsel with whom I had worked even after becoming a senior lawyer as a fellow senior counsel. I think my work experience with every one of them has been very, very, very enriching. See, it's very difficult to compare on any what called work-related scales, but some have other dimensions which somebody else will not have, may not have. Like Mr. Sarabji was a many-sided personality. So we got involved in several lawyers' associations activities, both domestically and also the Commonwealth level. Like Mr. Rao made me involved in several lawyers' associations. Very, very distinct memories with several of them. But what I really thought I picked up from each one of them is the integrity, which is very important in the profession. So as long as you have retained your integrity, right, you can move into any branch of the law and learn any branch of the law without any difficulty. Because all that you require is, as I call the plunging, attitude, then commitment, then if possible, the inclination to keep aside everything else and be only sitting with law 24 hours a day. All that is possible, right? I've learned all of it. So today, if I have a huge library which contains not only books on law, but almost every possible field, like including literature, philosophy, science, religion, right, or history, maybe psychology, anthropology, say anything you want, they're all here. The reason is, how do we collect all branches of knowledge to law? Because law must perform as a very important function to fulfill human needs, because all human needs and interests are not fulfilled in a natural way. It requires a lot of efforts, interventions by institutions, interventions by people, contributions by people and institutions. So all that is ultimately the role of law. So that can be comprehended only if you pay close attention to these what's called the many dimensions which are related to law. Well, that's how it is. Okay.
Thank you so much, sir.
Just not join,
For
be able
it.
to join.
He was there and he got
How
off
long you
again.
think it's bad for you?
More for 10-15 minutes, sir. He will be asking few specific questions on that. He will be joining in a second. Even sir, while I was reading about you, I got to know that you have written a number of books, and even in your student days, I guess you have written one book on land reforms in Tamil language. So, what was your inspiration behind writing uh, or publishing books?
I don't know. Maybe it's a natural inclination to write. If you ask me, I've been writing. No, that book was a very small monograph on land reforms, which was written by a joint effort of, I think, my association which I gathered with student days. So this book was circulated only mostly among the student community. But then it got into the hands of some political groups. So it's so very interestingly, some people thought that our ideas are extremely radically left, right? Some people thought that uh, we are not so radical as we ought to be. It's like that, right? So there are different impressions which we gathered, but then that was in 1975 or 76. But as I told you, we were running a Tamil fortnightly for students. We started writing. So even today, I am writing something or the other. Maybe I'll be able to share with all of you very soon. And the idea is, look here, you must leave. If you have learned something and you have been able to learn it fully to your satisfaction, you must try to uh, give shape to what you have learned. Like a good artist, you give him a piece of stone, a sculptor. It's like a piece of stone for a good sculptor is a temptation. You can't keep your hands, idle. You start sculpting slowly. So the temptation of a stone before a sculptor is like a temptation for a mind which would like to share, right? I think all writers, all thinkers, everybody would like to share what they've internally been digesting over a long period of time. So whether you like somebody writing or not is a different question, right?
Thank you so much, sir, for saying that. Now,
I
Jyoti
can
Prakash is there,
add
and
to some bit of, let's say, some bit of poetry also I've been writing. I can share with you.
indeed, sir. Even I have come across this thing that you are quite devoted to law, but whenever you get time, you like to write and read poetry.
Please tell me, what is Jyoti Prakash? Quickly come. I
Yeah.
think he's not able to log in. Where is
Yes, sir,
he?
he is there.
Where is he calling from?
He is in Bhubaneswar. We both are in Bhubaneswar, sir, Odisha.
You must be in a more uh, part of Bhubaneswar where it's free, but he must be in a crowded part.
No, sir, we live nearby, but due to network fluctuations and all that, everywhere it is there. So that is why this is there.
Yeah,
This
please
thing.
go ahead, Jyoti. Please.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Sir, am I
You
audible
last,
now?
yeah, you're audible.
Okay, sir. Thank you, Devasis. Thank you. And sir, apologies for the network interruptions. Yes, sir. So, sir, may I start the second phase of the interview with your permission?
Yeah, I thought Devshis has exhausted all the questions.
Sure, sir. Sure. Sir, as Devasis has asked you about many important things like your initial stage in the legal profession and about your senior advocacy as well as your experience under Justice Venkataramani and experience with Professor Madhav Menon. Now we would like to know about your experience with many judges. As we know, you have a professional standing of more than 44 years now. So you must have appeared before many ideal judges. So, if we ask you to tell about some of the judges who have influenced you and your personality, what would be your answer, sir?
There were a number of judges whose uh, work as a judge on the bench has definitely added to my understanding of law, its role, its reach, and its impact. And the way you assess and study institutions and their functionings, their deficiencies or inadequacies, and the way you can uh, improve upon or add on to the quality of functioning of the institutions. So that way, there's a number of judges who had what's called added and enriched perspectives on all this. So some of them belong to the 1980 era when I was still a very young lawyer trying to find my way and roots and gaining roots in the Supreme Court bar. So we had judges like Justice Krishnaiyer, who retired early in 1980s, and Chief Justice Bhagavati, and Justice Chinnappa, Justice D.A. Desai, Justice Tucker, all belong to that period, right? The what one may call the movement of the Supreme Court of India from playing its what has been understood as the well designed and conventionally articulated role to be played in administration of justice. So the movement of the court away from this and to make it as the most important institution in the social fabric of our country by engaging in very important dialogues and debates in the course of the discharge of its function, now made the story entirely different. So the 80s, post-emergency, the court began to look at the right to liberty as something priceless, invaluable, not to be negotiated, not to be given up. And so that valuable experience post-emergency and the commencement of a new understanding that the court must play a proactive role in pushing all frontiers of governance. And therefore you started hearing little later in the mid-80s and later, good governance. The whole idea both in political circles and in judicial circles. So that shift away from what has been perceived as the conventional role of the court as a mere dispute resolving institution, even a constitutional dispute resolving institution, from that role to an entirely different role. So today we conceive of the Supreme Court of India as playing a deliberative role. You virtually, it's a deliberating institution where every aspect relating to governance is deliberated. So we have all kinds of new ideas coming up about the separation of powers and old views, new views, all that is coming up. So I think a larger number of judges have influenced me, and I've been studying as a student of, let's say, as a student of the court. Every professional must be a student of the court where one practices. If you are not a student of the court, you are not a student of law, and you are not a professional in the real sense of the term. So, as a student of the Supreme Court of India, I began to be a student of, almost all other institutions, apex courts in different parts of the world. So, therefore, studying comparative law, comparative constitutional law, and what really happens by reason of a constitutional court in social order, in public life, in political, in the politics of the country, and how ideas emerge, social, political, economic. So today there is nothing which is, or to put it differently, today everything which is subject matter of governance is also a subject matter of judicial deliberation. So there is nothing which is kept out of judicial deliberations. So with some of the judges like this Krishnaiyer, I had very long association, even after retirement. So I was part of many law reforms or other socially relevant work which as Krishnaiyer had taken up. So I've been with him maybe from 1980s till almost till he passed away. We had shared long moments of sharing insights, working together. So it's been another great chapter in my life to have been associated with such eminent judges. I feel very fulfilled about it. So also with Chief Justice Bhagwati, it encouraged me in a big way while I was still about what 8 to 9 years in the bar, and so also with him till he passed away, we used to be together in number of very important what called intellectual assignments. So much so that this Bhagwati made me part of a South Asian task force which was working from Sri Lanka. He made me go along with him to travel to some foreign countries for international conferences. And as far as my association with Justice Chinnapreddy is concerned, after he demoted office and while he saw me working in the court, there have been occasions when he had encouraged me so well that I distinctly remember an order which he passed in a case where I appeared the other side for the Attorney General, Mr. G. Ramaswamy. So after dictating the order, he asked me, you please look into the order and tell me if the order requires any changes. So it was an honor to be called upon by a judge to do this, right? So when after retirement, we again became, working on certain programs while he was in Andhra Pradesh. And when Justice Venkataramani, who was the Chief Justice, asked me to write a book on Justice Chinnapreddy's judgments, probably he thought that my association with Justice Chinnapreddy would be a good reason for asking me to write this book. And I did write this book, and I think the book was completed in about 6 months' time. And so that brought me close to Venkatachalaya, just Venkatachalaya, and thereafter, that means once you wrote a book, some judges are involved in it, then you are drawn into something or the other. So, and much later when Justice Jeevan Reddy was influential in my designation, was responsible in a big way in my designation, senior advocate. We had other connections with him and other activities along with him. So also Justice K. Ramaswamy, who came from Andhra Pradesh and was a judge of the Supreme Court. He had asked me to give some research assistance in a number of cases, which I did informally, not being a judicial clerk or a law clerk, but very informally. So those are, one can keep adding to the list of judges and like that. What's your next question, please?
Yeah, he joined again.
Am I audible, devices?
Yeah, you are. Tell me quickly, yes.
Sure, sir. Sir, apologies for the poor network connection. I don't know why, but the interruptions are happening. Apologies for that, sir.
Maybe I'm not fortunate to have your uninterrupted, interaction,
No, sir.
right?
No, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, that was quite enlightening. You very well described about Justice Bhagwati, your association with Justice V.R. Krishna. We have learned a lot about him, and we duly read his books. Those are really valuable assets for us. And you have very rightly said that a lawyer or a prospective lawyer must be a student of the court itself, because without being a student of the court or without knowing the culture and the history of court, one cannot be a great lawyer. That should be highlighted by all the viewers that are viewing today. And after that, sir, I have another question for you. As we know, you were a part of Law Commission. You are also part of 20th Law Commission headed by Justice A.P. Shah, former Chief Justice of Delhi High Court. So during that span, you have worked on many aspects, and especially about the pendency in the judicial system. So what was your experience working under Justice A.P. Shah and working on the pendency in the judicial system?
So it was very exciting, and it was just A.P. Shah is one of the most inquisitive and very learned mind, and also a very one of those persons who can be designated as a liberal, the liberal what called uh, liberal school, right? So it was very exciting. I had done a lot of work with him. We had the death penalty report, and we had reports on the Arbitration Act, and we had reports on child custody issues. We had worked on course on a wide range of issues. Almost on a daily basis, we used to meet after my court work. But being a part-time member, of course, the nature of my contribution was very different. But he didn't mind those distinctions, whether you're a part-time or a full-time member. So, contributions, interactions were on a very different level. I've been rewarded by working with him. See, the subject of judicial reforms, etc., is a very vast subject. But unfortunately, I think we are working in isolation. And I picked up this insight that the Law Commission can be made a much more useful institution for the government and the civil society, which is not happening. So, the Law Commission, the idea of a Law Commission is not merely to roll out a report which will be to the liking of the government in power at any particular point of time, and not necessarily to the liking of a civil society or some section of the civil society. So we have heard lots of demands when this repeated rape issues, began coming up on punishment and things like that. So the role of a law commission is to have a long vision, having regard to what kind of impacts a particular law or a reform in the law will have, and not any given section of the community, but in the entire social order. So the whole penal law has relevance not only for maintaining law and order, it has relevance for a whole social order. So also today, fields such as environmental law, commercial law, including, let's say, the intellectual property law, they are not subjects which are to be seen in isolation. We have seen now during the pandemic whether vaccines should be made available at affordable prices or not, and whether the knowledge of making a vaccine should go out of an intellectual property domain. All those issues are coming up. So therefore, the impact on different sections of the community and the community as a whole, and how best one can avoid what called conflicts, rifts, violence, right, and the tendency to take a resort to violence, etc. How best you avoid by having a particular legal framework, and how do you really operate it? So we need, therefore, a commission which will be a great, what called social impact institution. I wish it happens very soon. And both my terms as a law commission member has been very rewarding. We had a number of other members who contributed as much as I had done, and I received a lot of encouragement and from both the chairman, Justice Venkataramani was chairman in the first time, Justice D.K. Jain was the chairman for a short while, because the A.P. Shah came in, and well, it's good. I think the law commission experience is one of my most cherished part of my professional career.
Right, sir. That is quite enlightening to know. You have explained all those things very purposefully, and we are very much enlightened by your words, sir. And after that, sir, I want to know about your experience in ICJ. As we know, you were associated with the International Court of Justice
No.
for a period of time.
International Commission of Juris. It is not Court of Justice, the International Commission of Juris of Geneva. So, the International Commission of Juris, while they had assigned some work through, while just Bhagavati was actually involved in it, and there were some free legal aid and other institutions who were also part of this group at some point of time between 1987 to 1993 or 94. So I had done some work at that time, but mostly in the realm of human rights, and that's.
I think we are not having a good luck with Jyoti Prakash asking you questions, and
So
he is
let's,
getting interrupted.
So if everything is that's true, shall we end our conversation for the day?
Jyoti Prakash,
Yes,
you should answer, I guess.
Yes, some problems. No.
No, his internet is not stable, I guess. Anyway, so sir, we will call it a day for today's talk show, and moving into giving you a formal vote of thanks, which was a part of Jyoti Prakash to give. I should take the honors of that.
We can,
So
we
sir,
can always call today's interaction as episode number 1. Okay? You can have more episodes, no problem.
indeed, sir. That was quite great on your
Okay.
part, and thank you so much, sir, for joining in.
Not
It was a great session, sir.
all of you,
Thank you.
and your very interesting endeavor in this kind of initiatives. That by itself will be very, I should say, enriching for you. You get a lot of questions answered, right? So, and very soon you will become an ace anchor, right?
With God's grace, maybe. But we are learning a lot of things, and today also we have learned a lot of things, sir. So
Very
thank
good.
you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for joining in.
Right.
Wish you great health and prosperity, sir.